the quiet, fading towns of America's Rust Belt, where factory smoke once promised stability and now only lingers as memory. A boy named James David Vance was born in 1984 in Middletown, Ohio. His world was not built on certainty. It was shaped by instability, economic decline, family turbulence, and the slow unraveling of the working-class America that had once defined the region. His early childhood was marked by fractures. His parents separated when he was young, and the sense of security that many children take for granted was often absent. In its place came the guiding presence of his grandmother, whom he called Mama, a sharp-tongued, fiercely protective woman whose resilience would become a cornerstone of his identity. She was tough in a way that felt almost cinematic herself, uncompromising, blunt, and deeply loyal. In her home, discipline replaced chaos, and survival replaced comfort. This contrast between instability and fierce love would define Vance's worldview long before he had words for it. As he grew, the economic decline around him deepened. Factories closed, jobs disappeared, addiction crept into neighborhoods. The American dream, once visible through steady work and upward mobility, felt increasingly distant. Yet Vance's path would diverge from many around him. After high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, serving during the Iraq War. The military gave him structure, discipline, and a brief escape from the instability of his youth. It also exposed him to a broader world, one far removed from the streets of Middletown. When his service ended, Vance pursued education with intensity. He attended Ohio State University, then achieved something that once seemed unimaginable for a boy from his background: admission to Yale Law School. The transition was not smooth. At Yale, he entered a world of elite institutions, intellectual debates, and cultural codes that felt foreign. He was no longer surrounded by people who shared his upbringing, and that gap became something he studied as much as law itself. At Yale, Vance met mentors, classmates, and ideas that would reshape his understanding of class, culture, and opportunity in America. But he never fully abandoned the world he came from. Instead, he began to analyze it, almost as if trying to translate two different languages, the language of Middletown and the language of elite America. After graduating, Vance entered the professional world as a lawyer and later moved into venture capital in Silicon Valley. It was a world of innovation, wealth, and rapid growth. Another cultural shift layered onto his already complex identity. Yet even as he moved through boardrooms and tech investments, the memory of Ohio remained central in his thinking. In 2016, Vance published the memoir that would change his life, Hillbilly Elegy. The book was not just autobiography, it was diagnosis and reflection. It explored the struggles of working-class white Americans, particularly in Appalachia and the Rust Belt, poverty, addiction, family instability, and the erosion of economic opportunity. It struck a nerve across the country. For some, it was a rare window into a misunderstood America. For others, it was controversial, debated and dissected. But for Vance, it became a defining pivot point. He was no longer just a lawyer or investor. He had become a public voice in a national conversation about class and identity. The book's success opened doors into media, policy discussions, and political circles. Over time, Vance's views evolved, becoming more aligned with populist conservatism. He began speaking more about cultural breakdown, economic dislocation, and the need to rebuild communities that had been left behind by globalization and technological change. In 2022, he entered formal politics, winning a seat in the U.S. Senate representing Ohio. His campaign was shaped by themes he had long explored: industrial decline, family structure, and skepticism toward elite institutions. Vance was no longer just interpreting America, he was now trying to shape its policy. As a senator, he positioned himself as part of a new generation of conservative leadership, focused less on traditional political rhetoric and more on cultural and economic critique. His speeches often returned to familiar ground: forgotten towns, struggling workers, and the idea that America's political system had failed to address deep structural problems. In 2024, his trajectory reached another turning point when he was selected as a vice presidential candidate alongside Donald Trump. The choice signaled a generational shift within the movement he represented, one rooted in populism, economic nationalism, and cultural critique of the political establishment. By 2025, Vance became Vice President of the United States, one of the youngest to ever hold the office. His rise from a troubled childhood in Ohio to Yale Law School, from memoirist to policymaker, became emblematic of a uniquely American narrative, reinvention through struggle, education, and political ascent. Yet, his story is not simply one of triumph. It is also one of ongoing tension between the America he came from and the America he now helps govern, between cultural critique and political power, between personal memory and national responsibility. J.D. Vance's journey is often described as a modern American arc, a movement from hardship to influence, from overlooked to central, from observer to actor. But beneath the symbolism lies a more complex truth. His story is still unfolding, shaped by the same forces he has spent years trying to understand. And in that sense, the most cinematic part of his biography is not where he came from, but the fact that the story is still being written in real time on the stage of American history itself.